Angband. Angband, meaning Iron Prison, was Morgoth's second great fortress, constructed beneath the arid and green Iron Mountains during the Years of the Trees. While Atunmo served as his original stronghold in the far north, Angband was built as a western outpost to guard against the Valar. After Atunmo was destroyed by the Valar in the War of the Powers, Angband became Morgoth's main fortress and seat of power throughout the First Age. The fortress was vast, built deep into the earth and fortified with iron, fire, and sorcery. At its peak stood Thangorodrim, 3 volcanic mountains created from the slag of Morgoth's forges. Beneath these peaks lay breeding pits, prisons, and armies, filled with orcs, trolls, balrogs, and other corrupted beings. Angband served as the launch point for all of Morgoth's campaigns, including the Dagor Bragolak and the Nirneth Arnoediad. It remained unconquered until the War of Wrath, when the Valar returned to Middle-earth and destroyed it, capturing Morgoth and casting him into the void. Nirnegroth. Nirnegroth, the Thousand Caves, was the grand underground palace and capital of Doriath, realm of the Sindarin elves. Located on the river Esgalduin in central Beleriand, it was built during the early First Age by order of King Thingol with the help of the dwarves of Norgrad and Belagost. The dwarves carved vast chambers, halls, and tunnels into the earth, adorning them with carvings, gems, and elegant stonework. Protected by the magical Griddle of Melian, an enchantment placed by Queen Melian, a Maya, Menegroth was shielded from enemies for centuries. Within its walls, Thingol ruled over one of the most powerful elven realms. The fortress was a center of culture, politics, and refuge, and was home to Luthien, one of the greatest figures in elven legend. Tragedy came when Thingol acquired a Silmaril and sought to have it set in a dwarven-crafted necklace. The dwarves, consumed by greed, murdered him, leading to the multiple sacks of Menegroth and the collapse of Doriath. It was never rebuilt. Tol Sirion, Minas Tirith of the First Age. Minas Tirith of the First Age, later known as Tol Ingarhoth, was a watchtower built by Finrod Felagund on the island of Tol Sirion in the river Sirion. Positioned between the highlands of Dorthonion and Heathloom, it guarded the pass of Sirion, one of the few routes from the north where Morgoth's armies could march into central Beleriand. Initially, it served as a defensive stronghold and communication link among elven kingdoms, but during the Dagor Bragolak, Sauron captured it and transformed it into a place of terror. Under his control, the island became known as the Isle of Werewolves. Sauron filled it with dark creatures and used it as a surveillance post and forward base for assaults. It became infamous as the site where Finrod died protecting Beren during their quest for a Silmaril. Tol Sirion was eventually cleansed by Luthien and Huan, who defeated Sauron and freed the prisoners, but the fortress was abandoned thereafter. Nargothrond. Nargothrond was a secretive elven fortress and city carved into the hills along the river Narog in western Beleriand. Founded by Finrod Felagund, inspired by the underground halls of Menegroth, it was intended as a safe haven and military center for the Noldor resisting Morgoth. Its hidden location and fortified design helped it remain secret for much of the First Age. Finrod ruled there until he left to aid Beren, leaving the city in the hands of his kin. Later, Turin Turambar came to Nargothrond and gained great influence. Under his urging, the elves abandoned secrecy and built a bridge across the Narog to confront Morgoth's forces openly. This change allowed for the dragon Glaurung to march directly into the city, overpower its defenses, and destroy it. Nargothrond fell in flame and ruin, its halls plundered and emptied. Its downfall marked a major turning point in the wars of Beleriand, and it was never reclaimed by the elves. Gondolin. Gondolin, the Hidden City, was the last great fortress of the Noldor in Beleriand. Founded by Turgon under the guidance of the Vala Ulmo, it was concealed within the valley of Tumladin and encircled by the mountains of Idkoriath. Accessible only by secret paths, Gondolin remained hidden from Morgoth for centuries. The city was a marvel of elven architecture, modeled after Tirion and Valinor. It was protected by 7 gates and divided into 12 noble houses, each with its own colors, standards, and fighting style. Gondolin became a beacon of light and order amid the growing shadow of Morgoth's dominance. Its secrecy was compromised by the betrayal of Meglin, who revealed its location to Morgoth. In a devastating surprise attack, Morgoth sent dragons, balrogs, and armies of orcs to destroy the city. Though Gondolin fell, survivors including Tuor, Idril, and Erendil escaped and played key roles in the events that ended the First Age. Tol Morwen. Tor Morwen was not a fortress of war, but rather a sacred and preserved island located in the seas west of Beleriand. It was formed from the peak of a hill that remained above the waterline after Beleriand was drowned at the end of the First Age. Its hill had once been the site of the graves for Morwen Eldwen and her children, Torin Torambar and Númenor. The tomb was originally marked by the Stone of the Hapless, a memorial set by grieving survivors. The Valar chose to preserve this site from destruction, allowing it to remain as a physical and spiritual reminder of the tragic legacy of the House of Hador. Tol Morwen was set apart and untouched, a silent tribute to honor, sorrow, and the burden of fate. Though it had no military use, Tol Morwen held immense cultural and emotional significance. It stood as one of the few places in Middle-earth that was explicitly protected by divine will, linking the stories of mortal men with the fate of the world in a way no fortress ever could. Amun Sul, Weathertop. Amun Sul was the tallest hill in the Weather Hills and the site of a great watchtower built during the early Third Age by the unified kingdom of Arnor. It housed the principal northern Palantir and was designed to provide a wide field of surveillance across Eriador. After the division of Arnor into Arthedain, Caradolan, and Rhudaur, control of Amun Sul became a matter of bitter contention. Eventually claimed by Arthedain, it was destroyed in TA 1409 by forces from Angmar. The tower was razed, but the Palantir was saved and moved to Fornost. Despite its destruction, Amun Sul retained strategic and symbolic importance. In the War of the Ring, Aragorn and the hobbits camped at its ruins, where Frodo was wounded by a Nazgul. The site marked the turning point in Frodo's journey, as well as the enduring relevance of the Old Kingdom's ruins in the fate of the Middle-earth. Barad-dûr. Barad-dûr, or the Dark Tower, was Sauron's greatest fortress in the land of Mordor. Construction began around SA 1000, when Sauron assumed the fair guise of Anatar and began influencing the elves and other peoples. Built atop the plateau of Gorgoroth, near Mount Doom, the tower took centuries to complete and was strengthened by the power of the One Ring. Barad-dûr was immense, with foundations sunk deep into the earth and towers that pierced the sky. Its battlements bristled with iron and sorcery, and it became the command center for all of Sauron's operations in Middle-earth. The fortress was protected by vast armies, harsh terrain, and a constant aura of dread. It was first besieged during the War of the Last Alliance at the end of the Second Age. Though Sauron was overthrown, the tower's foundations, bound to the ring, remained. When Sauron returned in the Third Age, Barad-dûr was rebuilt, becoming once again the symbol of his power, until the ring's final destruction brought it down forever. Tower of Cirith Ungol. The Tower of Cirith Ungol was a grim fortress built by the men of Gondor during the Second Age, and positioned strategically in the narrow mountain pass of Cirith Ungol along the Ephel Dúlath. Its stone architecture included vantage points for surveillance and strong defensive walls guarding one of the only western entrances into Mordor. In the Third Age, the tower became a dark outpost held by orcs, and served to guard the lair of Shelob, the giant spider. Its infamous association with Frodo's capture and imprisonment during the War of the Ring highlights its menacing reputation. The tower exemplifies the harsh and corrupted fortifications used by Sauron to secure his borders. Orthanc, Isengard. Orthanc was the central tower of Isengard, located in the southern end of the Misty Mountains, near the Gap of Rohan. Built by the Dunedain of Gondor in the early Third Age, it was formed from a single piece of black, unbreakable stone. Rising over 500 feet high, the tower was both a marvel of engineering and a strategic watchpoint overseeing the western approaches to Gondor. The surrounding ring of Isengard formed a circular wall enclosing the valley. Originally filled with gardens and trees, Isengard served as an outpost of Gondor until it was abandoned during Gondor's decline. In TA 2759, Saruman was granted the keys to Orthanc by Steward Beren. Initially acting as an ally, Saruman eventually sought power for himself and began corrupting the fortress. He industrialized Isengard, cutting down trees, building furnaces, and breeding armies of Uruk-hai. From Orthanc, he launched attacks on Rohan during the War of the Ring. The fortress fell when the Ents of Fangorn, led by Treebeard, destroyed the outer defenses and flooded the valley. Orthanc itself, being indestructible, endured. After Saruman's fall, it was reclaimed and restored by King Elisar. Minas Anur, Minas Tirith. Minas Anur, Tower of the Sun, was originally built by Anarion to mirror his brother Isildur's city, Minas Ithil. Situated on the western side of the Anduin at the foot of Mount Mindoluin, it became the royal seat of Gondor after Osgiliath fell into decline. Over time, it was renamed Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, when Minas Ithil fell to evil and became Minas Morgul. The city was constructed with 7 concentric tiers rising in elevation, each with fortified walls and gates offset from one another to slow any advancing enemy. At the summit stood the White Tower of Ecthelion, where the kings and stewards ruled and one of the remaining Palantir was kept. Minas Tirith was a masterpiece of Númenorian engineering, combining military strength with cultural splendor. During the War of the Ring, Minas Tirith became the final line of defense against Sauron's full assault. The siege of Minas Tirith and the Battle of the Pelennor Fields were turning points in the war. Though heavily damaged, the city withstood the attack and was later restored under King Elisar. Minas Ithil, Minas Morgul. Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, was constructed by Isildur shortly after the founding of Gondor. Located on the slopes of Ephel-Duath, it was intended to watch over Mordor and counterbalance Minas Anur in the west. The city was radiant and beautiful, lit by moonlight and housing the Ithil Stone, one of the Palantir. Minas Ithil fell to Sauron's forces in the Third Age and was transformed into the Bastion of Terror. Renamed Minas Morgul, the Tower of Dark Sorcery, it became home to the Nazgul and the Witch King. Its light turned sickly green, its gates spewed shadow, and it was avoided even by orcs. During the War of the Ring, Morgul was the staging point for Sauron's assault on Gondor. It cast a shadow on the land both literally and spiritually. After the destruction of the ring, it was abandoned and left to rot, too tainted to be reclaimed by the kingdoms of men. Tharbad. Tharbad was a strategic fortress city established during the early Second Age by Númenorians as a river crossing and supply base. Located on the River Gwathlo, or Grey Flood, it was situated between what would later become the realms of Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south. Tharbad played a crucial role in facilitating the movement of troops, goods, and information between these distant territories. The city included a fortified bridge, stone causeways, and towers that rose above the marshy terrain. It evolved into a key hub for trade and communication, particularly during the height of the Dunedain kingdoms. Tharbad was also instrumental in the defense of Eriador against early threats from the east. However, as the kingdoms of men declined, so did Tharbad. Political fragmentation, environmental degradation, and repeated flooding eventually overwhelmed the city. By the Third Age, it had become a desolate ruin. Its bridge collapsed, its streets submerged. Though abandoned, Tharbad's legacy remained tied to the grandeur and decay of Númenorian civilization. Edoras and the Golden Hall of Meduseld. Edoras was the capital city of Rohirrim, located centrally in the land of Rohan on a hill overlooking the vast plains of the Riddermark. Unlike many of the stone fortresses of Gondor, Edoras was primarily a wooden city, surrounded by a palisade wall, making it more of a fortified settlement than a heavily walled fortress. At its heart stood the Golden Hall of Meduseld, a great mead hall distinguished by its golden thatched roof and richly adorned interior, which served as the throne and seat of the King of Rohan. While Edoras lacked monumental stone defenses, its position and construction reflected the culture and military practices of the Rohirrim, emphasizing swift cavalry defense over prolonged siege warfare. Meduseld was not only a military seat, but a cultural symbol embodying the spirit and unity of the Rohirrim people. It played a pivotal role during the War of the Ring as the rallying point of Rohan's kings and armies. Helm's Deep, Hornburg. Helm's Deep, located in the White Mountains, was originally built by Gondor as a western defense, later granted to Rohan by Steward Sirion after the Oath of Eorl. It became a vital stronghold in the Riddermark. The central fortress, the Hornburg, was built into the mountainside and protected by the Deeping Wall, a great stone barrier across the valley's mouth. The gorge behind the wall, called the Deep, offered a secure fallback position. A culvert supplied fresh water and was one of the few weaknesses in its defenses. The fortress was used as a refuge for the people of Rohan during the war and designed to hold out against overwhelming odds. During the War of the Ring, Helm's Deep was besieged by Saruman's army of 10,000 Uruk-hai in the Battle of the Hornburg. Despite the odds, King Theoden and his warriors held the fortress until the arrival of Gandalf and Erkenbrand's riders turned the tide. Helm's Deep became an enduring symbol of resilience and hope. Dol Guldur. Dol Guldur, the Hill of Sorcery, was a dark fortress established by Sauron in the early Third Age after his defeat in the War of the Last Alliance. Disguised as the Necromancer, Sauron chose the hill of Amon Lang in southern Greenwood the Great as his new base, corrupting the forest into what would become Mirkwood. Though not as grand as Barad-dûr, Dol Guldur was saturated with fear and malice. It became a center of shadow and evil creatures, including orcs, wargs, giant spiders, and fell spirits. The presence of the One Ring's master corrupted the land, and the fortress served as a staging ground for Sauron's growing power. The White Council debated its threat for centuries, and eventually drove Sauron from Dol Guldur in 2941. He returned to Mordor, revealing his true identity. During the War of the Ring, Dol Guldur remained active under the command of Khamûl, a Nazgûl. It was finally destroyed by Galadriel during the simultaneous assault on Mordor, cleansing the forest of its lingering darkness. Anu Minas. Anu Minas, the Tower of the West, was the first capital of Arnor, established by Elendil at the shores of Lake Nenúial in Eriador. It was a grand city, blending Númenorian architecture with the natural beauty of the north. It housed one of the Palantir and served as a major center of administration, culture, and communication in the early Third Age. As Arnor's population declined, the city was gradually abandoned in favor of more defensible locations like Fornost. Despite its desertion, Anu Minas remained a revered ruin, its presence a reminder of the unity and strength once held by the northern Dúnedain. After the War of the Ring, King Elisar chose Anu Minas as the seat of his northern realm, restoring it to its former significance. Though quiet for centuries, it symbolized the reawakening of the ancient kingdoms and the healing of the line of Elendil. Osgiliath. Osgiliath was the original capital of Gondor, founded jointly by Isildur and Anarion near the end of the Second Age. Straddling the Anduin River, it functioned as both a royal residence and a fortified bridge city, linking Minas Ithil and Minas Anor. The Dome of Stars, located at the city's heart, held one of the Palantir and symbolized Gondor's unity. Osgiliath's design combined beauty and strength. Towering buildings rose above the bridge, which was broad enough to support homes and barracks. It was Gondor's cultural and political center and remained so for centuries. However, internal strife, especially the kin strife, and later the Great Plague led to its decline. During the Third Age, it became a battleground between Gondor and Mordor. By the War of the Ring, Osgiliath was a decaying ruin, frequently contested. Faramir's garrison defended it bravely but was overwhelmed by Sauron's forces. Though militarily broken, its symbolic role persisted as Gondor's first and last bridge between East and West. The Black Gate, Morannon. Known as Morannon, the Black Gate was the main fortified entrance to Mordor, positioned between the twin mountain ranges of the Ephel Duath and the Arad Lithui in the northwest of Mordor. This colossal gateway featured two massive towers connected by heavy iron portcullises and reinforced gates, engineered to be virtually impregnable. Its surroundings were heavily guarded by orcs and monstrous creatures serving Sauron. In the War of the Ring, the Black Gate was the stage for the final confrontation, where the allied forces of Gondor, Rohan, and their allies marched to challenge Sauron directly to provide a diversion. This devastating battle held the gates of Mordor and allowed Frodo and Sam to fulfill their quest, ultimately leading to the downfall of Sauron and the destruction of Barad-dûr. Elostirion. Elostirion was the tallest of the three white towers in Emin Beriad, built near the end of the Second Age by Gil-galad and Elendil. Situated west of the Shire, it faced the Undying Lands across the sea, and stood as a spiritual and symbolic watchpost, connecting the elves of Middle-earth with their ancient homeland. Unlike other fortresses, Elostirion was not constructed for war. It housed a special palantir that could only look toward Valinor and could not communicate with the other Seeing Stones. Its function was largely ceremonial and contemplative, allowing the elves to gaze westward with longing. Though Elostirion never played a role in the battles or conquests, it remained a beacon of memory and hope, maintained quietly throughout the Third Age. When the elves sailed to the west at the end of the age, the palantir was taken aboard, and the tower was left behind. Elostirion's enduring presence reflected the elves' fading presence and unbroken connection to the Blessed Realm. The Grey Havens, Mithland. The Grey Havens, also known as Mithland, was an elven port city situated on the western shores of Middle-earth, beside the Bay of Belfalas. Primarily a harbor for elven ships sailing west to the Undying Lands, the Grey Havens were constructed with natural defenses in mind. High cliffs and stone walls complemented watchtowers that safeguarded against seaborne and land-based threats. More than a military fortification, Mithland was a spiritual and cultural waypoint, the last refuge for elves before their journey to Valinor. Though its defensive role was secondary to its function as a sanctuary and a port of passage, the Grey Havens remained vigilant and secured, especially as the Third Age drew to a close. See how these fortresses shaped the great battles of Arda. Watch our next video, Major Wars in Middle-earth Explained.